Hello friends, welcome. Here we are discussing real stories told by real people. Today we have a story about a man who paid tuition for his wife. But she did not appreciate it. Let's see what happens. My name is Jackson. I'm 38 years old. I work as an engineer for a large technology company. My wife, Melissa, 34, is studying for a master's degree in psychology. She is 4 years younger than me. And when we met, her enthusiasm and cheerfulness were like a breath of fresh air. But the last 6 months have changed everything. Our relationship became strained, and I felt the gap between us growing. Melissa has always been a beauty. She is of medium height, with long brown hair and green eyes. Her smile used to light up any day, but now I saw her less and less. Her face was constantly furrowed, and her eyes, which had once sparkled with joy, now seemed dull and tired. One evening, after another argument, I tried to talk to her. "Melissa, what's going on with us?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She sighed without taking her eyes off the laptop. "Jackson, I'm tired. Studying takes up all my time. I just can't handle it all," she replied without looking at me. I sat down next to her on the sofa and tried to take her hand, but she pulled it away. "I know it's hard for you," I said, "but I feel that we are moving away from each other. I want to help." Melissa finally looked at me, and I saw something like pain in her eyes. "Do you really want to help? Then stop pushing me," she said. I felt my heart constrict. I tried to do everything to support her. I have taken on all financial obligations and almost all household chores. But it didn't help. "I'm not pushing you, Melissa," I replied. "I just want us to be close again." She looked away again and closed her laptop. "Jackson, I need to be alone. I need time to sort out my studies and myself," she said and went into the bedroom. I was left alone in the living room, thinking about her words. I loved her, but I felt like something was slipping away. Her master's degree required a lot of effort, and I knew she was going through a lot of stress. I was hoping that this was temporary, that we could handle it. But every day brought new quarrels and misunderstandings. We began to live as neighbors, rarely talking to each other. I continued to pay for her studies and do almost all the household chores, but it didn't help us get closer. There was a cold wall in our relationship that I couldn't break down. Melissa became more and more withdrawn. She often sat at her laptop, texting with someone for hours. I tried not to interfere, respecting her personal space, but I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something was going wrong. Every evening I waited for her to become the cheerful girl I fell in love with again. But every evening brought only disappointment. We were far from each other, and I didn't know how to get back what we had. One evening I was sitting in the living room reading a book. Melissa had been studying on her laptop for several hours. I could hear her phone constantly vibrating with messages. This went on until she fell asleep right on the couch. Melissa's light snoring and even breathing were a sign to me that she was fast asleep. I went over to the couch and looked at her phone. The screen was flooded with notifications. I was filled with curiosity. I took her phone to check if something serious had happened. What I saw turned my life around. There were messages on the screen from Marcus, her classmate. They corresponded, and I quickly realized that their communication was far from just friendly. "I miss you." I read one of his messages. "I can't wait to be together." My heart sank. I continued to read on. Melissa responded to him with the same warmth and tenderness. "I miss you too," she wrote. "Jackson doesn't suspect anything. I'm only holding on for the sake of studying." I felt the world crumbling around me. I continued to read the correspondence, and each new line was a blow to my heart. They planned the future together. Marcus was to her who she really wanted to be with. Melissa suddenly began to move. I quickly put the phone back in its place and returned to my seat. She opened her eyes a little and looked at me. Jackson, what are you doing? What is it? She asked in a sleepy voice. I was just reading, I replied, trying to stay calm. She yawned and closed her eyes again, falling asleep. I was sitting in an armchair, watching her. 1,000 thoughts were spinning in my head. But I knew one thing. Our life would never be the same. The next day, I tried to behave as usual. Melissa was getting ready for classes, and I went to work. But all the time, I couldn't get rid of the images of correspondence that I saw at night. They've been following me all day. In the evening, I decided to talk to her. Melissa, we need to talk. I began when she got home. She looked at me in surprise. What do you want to talk about, Jackson? What is it? She asked, sitting down opposite him. I gathered my thoughts and, trying to remain calm, continued. I have a feeling that you have distanced yourself from me. You're busy all the time, and I feel like something's wrong. She looked away, avoiding my gaze. Jackson, I just have a lot of work to do. You know how important this master's degree is to me, she replied without looking up. I understand, I said. But it seems to me that it's not just about studying. She sighed and stood up. I need to finish the project. Let's talk later, she said and went into the office. I was left alone, feeling the wall of misunderstanding grow between us again. Thoughts of what to do next were spinning in my head. But I knew one thing. I had to find out the truth. I got up early the next day. Melissa was still asleep, and I quietly left the bedroom so as not to wake her up. A plan formed in my head. I knew I had to act carefully and coolly. The first thing I did was call my friend Richard, a divorce lawyer. He has always been reliable and professional. Hey, Richard, I need to meet you, I said when he answered the phone. Of course, Jackson. Come to the office in an hour, he replied. I packed up quickly and went to him. We sat down in his office, and I told him everything I had learned about Melissa's correspondence with Marcus. Jackson, you need to be careful, Richard said after listening to me carefully. We must collect all the evidence and prepare for the possible consequences. What do you suggest? I asked, feeling the mounting tension give way to determination. Richard explained the plan to me. I had to keep collecting evidence of her cheating, but not show that I knew anything. He advised her to install a program on her phone to copy messages and collect financial information for a possible division of property. We need you to be fully prepared, Richard said, then we'll have a better chance of getting justice. I nodded, agreeing with his words. We discussed the details of the plan and agreed to keep in touch. When I got home, Melissa was already in class. I took advantage of her absence to install the program on her phone. It was easy, since I knew her password. In the following days, I continued to play the role of a caring husband. I cooked dinners, asked about her studies, and tried not to show that anything had changed. But inside I was seething with anger and resentment. Every night, when Melissa fell asleep, I checked her phone. The program worked flawlessly. I read their correspondence and saved all the messages. They continued to discuss their plans, and with each message, my resolve grew stronger. One evening, when Melissa returned home, I cooked dinner, and we sat down at the table. How was your day? I asked, trying to sound natural. She smiled, but the smile did not reach her eyes. It was a lot of work, but everything is fine, she replied, looking away. I noticed her phone ringing again from the message, but she quickly put it in her pocket. You've been very busy lately, I said. Maybe we should spend the weekend together. Just relax and be alone. She hesitated, and I felt her nerves tighten. Maybe later, Jackson. I have too much to do right now, she replied, avoiding my gaze. I nodded, pretending to understand, but inside I knew that this farce would end soon. I continued to follow my plan, collect evidence and prepare for the decisive moment. It's been a few weeks. My lawyer was ready for any development. I was waiting for the right moment to strike the last blow. It's been a few weeks. I've gathered enough evidence of Melissa's infidelity. Every evening, when I checked her phone, I felt anger building inside me. But I knew I had to stay calm and cool. The day came when I was ready to act. In the evening, when Melissa returned from class, I was sitting in the living room, holding a folder with printed messages in my hands. She looked tired, but smiled when she saw me. "Hey, Jackson," she said, taking off her coat. "How was your day?" "We need to talk, Melissa," I replied in a serious tone. She stopped and looked at me in surprise. "What do you want to talk about?" "What is it?" she asked, coming closer. I put the folder on the table in front of me. "About your relationship with Marcus," I said, watching her reaction. Her face paled, and she took a step back. "What do you mean? What is it?" she asked, trying to keep calm. I opened the folder and started posting printouts of messages. "That's what I mean," I replied, showing her the evidence. "I know all about your correspondence and your plans." Melissa looked at the printouts and then at me. There was fear and confusion in her eyes. "Jackson, it's not what you think," she began, but I interrupted her. "Not what I think it is." My voice trembled with suppressed rage. "These messages speak for themselves. You cheated on me with him for 6 months." She lowered her head. Tears began to flow down her cheeks. "I made a mistake," she said through tears. I was confused and didn't know what to do. "I'm sorry." I looked at her, feeling my emotions overwhelm me. "You used me, Melissa," I said. "You only held on to me for my financial support. How could you?" She came up to me and tried to take my hand, but I pulled away. "Jackson, please give me a chance to fix this." "I'll do anything," she pleaded. I sighed and looked into her eyes. "It's already gone too far," I replied. "I filed for divorce. Here are the papers." Pulled the divorce papers out of the folder and handed them to her. She took them with trembling hands and looked at them, then back at me. "Please don't do this," she said, sobbing. "I can't lose you." "You've already lost me," I replied coldly. "We don't have a future together anymore." She sat down on the sofa and covered her face with her hands, sobbing. I felt empty, but I knew it was the only way out. "I told our families and friends about the divorce," I continued. "But we will keep the reason a secret. It will be better for everyone." Melissa nodded without looking up. I left her alone in the living room and went into the bedroom, feeling a weight fall off my shoulders. But there were new challenges ahead. It's been a few days since I handed Melissa the divorce papers. We still lived under the same roof, which became unbearable for me. Seeing her every day and knowing that she had betrayed me was torture. Melissa tried to stay out of my way. She spent most of her time in her room or studying. In the evenings, I stayed in the living room, lost in thought. One evening, I heard her come up to me quietly. "Jackson," her voice was timid, "can we talk?" I looked up and saw her standing in the doorway. She looked haggard, her eyes red from crying. "What do you need?" I asked coldly. She came closer and sat on the edge of the sofa. "I know I've ruined everything," she began, "but I do not know where to go. I don't have money for rent, and I can't go back to my parents." I sighed. The situation was difficult, and despite all my resentment, I didn't want to leave her on the street. "You can't stay here, Melissa," I said. "We both need space." She nodded, lowering her head. "I understand, but I have no other choice," she said. I felt two forces fighting inside me, the desire to help and the desire to get rid of the pain. "Okay," I finally said, "I'll give you some money for the first time. You'll find a place to live and leave." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "Thank you, Jackson. I promise I'll leave as soon as possible," she replied. The next day, I withdrew cash from the bank and handed her an envelope with money. "Here," I said. "This should be enough for the first time. Find a place to live and leave." She took the envelope and looked at me with gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'd really appreciate it." We barely spoke before she left. She was packing, and I was trying not to be at home. Time passed slowly, and I counted the days until she left. Finally, the day came when she left the house. I came back from work and saw empty rooms. A sense of relief mixed with bitterness. I knew that there were still many difficulties ahead, but the first step was taken. Soon, I will be able to start a new life without lies and betrayal. But while I was sitting in an empty house, realizing that our life together had come to an end, so we have come to the end of this story. Please write your opinion in the comments. We will be interested to know it. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss new, even more exciting stories. We wish you good luck.